Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Flooding from Hurricane Melissa kills at least 20 in Haiti as Jamaica's declared a disaster area after being struck by the storm. US President Donald Trump has finalized a trade deal with South Korea and says he believes the US is going to have a deal with China ahead of meeting Xi Jinping tomorrow. Israeli military says it's carried out a targeted strike in the northern Gaza Strip after Gaza's civil defense agency says earlier strikes have killed more than 100 people. Flooding from Hurricane Melissa has killed at least 20 in Haiti. The storm also struck Cuba with winds of up to 115 miles per hour and heavy rain flooding roads and homes. Last night it hit Jamaica, which has been declared a disaster area by its Prime Minister. Take a listen to what locals are saying.
It was terrible. I witnessed I'm 54 and I witnessed about 3 dangerous storm. I was talking about Firth, Gilbert, Ivan, Emily, and one between that I was in America, but this last one, but this one was worse. It was terrible.
When we say flat, all who have decos flat, all who have zinc flat, come, we need help now!
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by Wissam, Keyrouz, editor at Al Arabiya, who's here with me in the studio, and correspondent Sara Firth, who's in Washington. Wissam, let's start with you. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's great to have you with us.
It's my greatest pleasure to be with you, as always.
Always good to have you. So we did see some reaction there from people in Jamaica after Hurricane Melissa did hit the country. How are Jamaica and Cuba coping with this aftermath of this Category 5 hurricane?
Let's remember that this huge storm has hit Jamaica with a strength that is on the highest levels. And we have been hearing a lot of harrowing stories about people stranded on the roofs, about people really trying to escape from waters and rivers that are flowing from every side, about trees that are piling up like toothpicks. Now, having said this, the storm moved to, of course, we have the tremendous and very unfortunate human cost for this, but now the storm moved to Cuba, and Cuba is bracing for also a very big impact. Now, what is more feared is what we are expecting in the Bahamas, and maybe a repeat of the Dorian storm and the devastating storm that happened in 2019. We hope it won't happen, but at least we are seeing now a lot of, political, especially from America, voices. We know that help is on the way.
Yes, absolutely. Help is on the way. Sara, what are the main risks as Melissa does move towards the Bahamas and Bermuda, as Wissam just said to me, and what precautions are being taken? Because in Jamaica, the loss of life has not been anywhere as high as they expected because of forewarning.
Yes, I mean, help is on the way. That is the message, you're correct, from the United States. And let's talk a little bit about what that help is going to look like. You've had the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he's come out and said, look, the US government is in incredibly close contact with countries in the region, including Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Bermuda. Wissam's absolutely right. Next in Hurricane Melissa's path, its next targets are going to be Bermuda and the Bahamas. And so there is a scramble now to get those rescue and response teams in place to the areas where they're needed. So the Secretary of State saying that those teams are on their way. There's been some criticism here in the United States over what's been seen as perhaps a little bit of a slower approach than would be normal when it comes to emergency response. in part, some quarters here are saying because of the government shutdown. But the warnings and the risks, they remain very similar to what we've already seen play out on the ground in Jamaica. The warnings came early, for people to shelter in place, to not use this as a moment to be brave because of the severity of the risks. So things like the storm surges, the amount of water and rainfall, the flooding risks, all of those incredibly dangerous, but the wind speeds as well, the damage potentially to infrastructure. We are looking at that storm sweeping through the central and southeastern Bahamas. It's already brought storm force winds early this afternoon. So that's going to be overnight, everyone tracking the storm and its impact on the Bahamas. It said it's thought it's possible it'll bring a 4 to 7 foot storm surge and 5 to 10 inches of rain to southeastern Bahamas. So you can just imagine locals in the area trying to deal with the potential repercussions of that, a very scary moment.
Maybe a word also, Sara, about the political signaling that is coming from America. Now that we have a Latino Ministry of Foreign Affairs or a State Secretary who is trying to balance a little bit the American narrative within the Latin world. Of course, the Bahamas, the Caribbean has always been in the backyard of the United States, but also the United States itself is very much under the threat of, these storms. Now we have heard a very strong signal from America who is waging a war on what they call the narco-terrorists in South America, in Venezuela specifically, and in Colombia. So now it's also a Trump moment where he can give a different signal to this huge backyard of his, to the Latin world, and also to the Bahamas, which is full of American tourists.
Yeah, no, as you said, Marco Rubio.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wissam.
Sorry, Sarah, go for it.
I mean, it's just absolutely right. The Secretary of State has made it very clear that the US is pledging its full support. The Americans are so important for the US administration, for the Trump administration. And it is important signaling at a time when there has been strained relations in other areas. So they have clearly thrown their full support behind rescue and response efforts and aid to some of those areas that have been affected and that are going to be affected in the coming days.
Absolutely.
But another side of this that has been really interesting is when we talk about this storm and the ferocity of Melissa, it's been that lots of people, meteorologists, Wissam, have been saying Hurricane Melissa intensified at a speed rarely seen. And that was because in the Caribbean, the water is abnormally warm. And a lot of this, they're saying, is linked to climate change, and we're seeing massive different things happening in our environment due to it.
Well, the science has been persistently and very clearly stating that extreme phenomenon will be first more extreme, second more frequent, and third and unfortunate, it will have more effect on human lives and on people, because it's a cycle. So when you have warmer water, so the storms will be a little even harsher, and then the water will be warmer, and it is a cycle. Now, having said this, is it going to change anytime soon? No. What's going to change is the way we people will be prepared and will be coping. And fortunately, now we see in Jamaica itself, as you said, fortunately, we haven't seen, a toll that is, extreme, because people has been expecting this. And unfortunately, especially this part of the world, will have to be much more prepared. And we all as humankind, we have to be more prepared, more into the mindset of having livelihoods that are prepared for the worst scenarios.
Wissam and Sarah, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. And US President Donald Trump's tour of Asia has continued today, and that's in South Korea. South Korea has promised to invest $350 billion in the US, as well as a reduction of reciprocal tariffs. Trump was also given a replica gold crown and awarded the Grand Order. Here's what he had to say earlier.
We had a tremendous meeting today with South Korea. I think the meeting a lot was determined, very much determined, and we made our deal. We pretty much finalized a trade deal, and we discussed some other things having to do with national security, etc. And I think we came to a conclusion on a lot of very important items. We had a terrific meeting in Japan also, and we concluded a trade deal, very big one, a very big trade deal. And
Sara, I must say one thing. I've got to give it to Donald Trump. He has had so much energy on this trip, hasn't he, Wissam and Sara?
Absolutely.
For 80 years old. I mean, he hasn't stopped going. He's been on a complete roll, Donald Trump, clocking up billions of dollars during his tour. Sara, I mean, this is good. It's been a good week for him.
It has. He is on a roll. You're right, Leigh-Ann, and it is very impressive. Plenty of his administration are very quick to point out that whenever they reach out to him, day or night, whichever part of the world he's in, he is working. So, look, the image of President Trump on this whirlwind tour of Asia as this sort of globe-trotting deal maker, that is exactly the image the White House want portrayed. Of course, he was absolutely feted in South Korea. You know, the crown, the civilian award, the honor guard, everything that we know President Trump responds very well to, and clearly very happy coming out of that meeting. The real jewel in the crown, though, is going to be that meeting in China with President Xi tomorrow on Thursday. That is going to be very, very important. I think it's also worth tempering what is clearly a very successful tour for President Trump with a note of caution, because amongst the sort of ceremony of the moment and the diplomatic niceties, there hasn't been much put on paper. You know, you've had the US and South Korea haggling over South Korea's promised billions of investment, 350 billion, how that is actually going to be invested. And there are still those questions over exactly how that is going to be delivered. So for all the excitement, for all the brilliant diplomatic optics of this, I think it is interesting to sort of note we are still a little bit short on the detail, and going into this all-important moment with that meeting on Thursday between Trump and President Xi, I think we're going to be looking for perhaps a little bit more detail behind those diplomatic niceties.
And Wissam, I must say, a lot of this trip has been very interesting when it comes to rare earth minerals deals. That's something Donald Trump's been focused on in the Asia region. And we also saw that now he's spoken to South Korea. It's going to be interesting to see that their tariffs on cars that they will export to the US has gone down. But as Sara said, thin on the detail. But everyone is saying that the meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump is probably one of the most significant this year. It's the world's two biggest economies meeting. And lots of people are saying, who has the leverage going into it? Is it China or is it America?
First, let us not forget that Trump is always thin on details. Trump is not a details person at all. He is a momentum person.
Oh, yeah.
He is a momentum person. And we have to see, all of us, that the way he is dealing with everyone he's meeting in his Asian tour makes us feel that he is very happy. He is at ease with every single person he is meeting. And apparently people who are meeting him are also they understand his modus operandi, and it has been the same modus operandi. It's about deals. It's about giving him the impression that we are ready to pump in billions into the American economy, and in return, he is ready to, make the deals and to ease up the tariff on them. Now, having said this, it is most and foremost what's happening tomorrow is that the most important part of this trip. It is the meeting between Trump and Xi. Both are very prepared, and both apparently have the will and the need to make it work. America is still China's biggest market, although it's not its only market. China has been diversifying. They are very strong in doing so. And America also, they think they have the leverage, they have the momentum, and they want to change. So the whole world we live in, this whole economy of global, is about America and China together. And the Americans, especially Trump and the MAGA movement, they have the impression that this globalization has been playing into the interest of China much more. It wasn't supposed to be that way. Now they want to rebalance this. And the Chinese, they understand. And they understand that they have to make concessions. And believe me, Xi is more strong within his system than Trump is within his system. Xi is on top of a huge machine, which is the Communist Party, and a huge country, and no one is making him any problems. Now, he is ready for concessions. He has been digesting the concessions, but also digesting the price. And apparently, according to many reports, the price will be political, and maybe it's going to be Taiwan. And this is what they want, at least.
This is what they want. But it is so interesting what you said there, because Donald Trump is a momentum's man. And I've never thought of it like that. He's not detail-oriented, but he seems to get the ball rolling. And Sarah, I like the way Wissam mentioned Taiwan to me there. There's also another name that's been thrown into the hat, someone Donald Trump wanted to meet, Kim Jong-un, of course, the leader of North Korea, who he once called Little Rocket Man. And he tweeted that in his first term. Is it on the table? Could he see Kim Jong-un possibly?
No, very interesting. As always, you do have the shadow of North Korea hanging over this a little bit because you had President Trump floating the possibility of having that meeting with North Korea. You've also had, at the same time that he touched down in South Korea, the missile testing, which raised some eyebrows here. The White House have come out and said, look, the timing wasn't right for this. That meeting will not go ahead. And as we've discussed a little bit earlier, before the cameras started rolling, you know, Wissam had said that, look, potentially that would overshadow what has been a very important and successful tour already. And I'd agree with that assessment. I think here in Washington, the focus is really on trying to ease the investors' nervousness about the trade tit for tat between China and the US. And I think this trip is certainly doing that. You know, President Trump has come out and said he expects a good deal from Thursday's meeting. He expects a good deal for both. I think he'd really like the characterization of himself as the momentum man. He has got that going for him. And it has seemed to be enough for now to ease the sort of investor nervousness about the potential impact of those ongoing trade disputes between the two sides that do so clearly need each other. So let's see if he can use that momentum and get the good deal for both that he is promising.
Well, apparently Kim Jong-un also felt the urge to have some momentum. Also, this is why we have seen rockets being fired in North Korea. But in the same time, he will have his moment. Now, as you know, Sara and I, we both agree, it's a moment for China, for Xi. And there has been a very interesting geopolitical flip very recently. We have heard Trump saying something very interesting. He said, I want China, I want President Xi to help me with Putin. Whilst everyone on this planet was expecting the opposite, was expecting that the rapprochement with Russia was meant to be something against China. Now, it is Trump, we'll see what will happen, but let's agree that this is a huge moment for the world, for geopolitics all over the world. If by any chance we have less geopolitics, more interest, less possibility for Cold War, and more possibility for a new economic world order, maybe it's a way forward for humanity, maybe it's a good thing, and maybe Trump is the man, or it's the people from whom you expect nothing that eventually can make big things.
And we know that Donald Trump is an out-of-the-box thinker, and he's probably the man that can make it happen.
Look at Gaza. We'll be talking later about Gaza. He is the person who can do things that you don't expect. This is how it is.
Yes, and I'm sure everyone will be really interested in what happens in that meeting tomorrow between Donald Trump and President Xi. And as always, the presents, because we've seen some fabulous presents on this tour. But thanks so much for your thoughts on that. Let's move on. And Israeli military says it carried out a targeted strike in the northern Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Gaza's Civil Defense Agency and hospitals have said a series of other strikes have killed more than 100 people across the Palestinian territory. The Israeli military have issued a statement saying that a soldier was killed during fighting in southern Gaza. Meanwhile, President Trump says the US-backed ceasefire in Gaza is not at risk. Wissam, We've had a lot going on in the last 24 hours between Israel and Gaza, and the situation has been tense. We know the ceasefire has been fragile. How are rescue teams in Gaza coping following last night's attack that we did see, and a lot of people, 100 people, lost their lives?
It's such a sadness that some people that thought that they were finally safe, that they finally passed through the huge long tunnel of suffering and the war, and then they die because, you know, somehow this, dynamics, this way it works, had that the Israelis decided that they have to strike. Of course, nothing can justify this. Killing people cannot be justified. And it's not gonna be the last time, I think, because this whole deal is fragile. Although I'm saying it's fragile, I think it's also very strong, and it will remain. Because the Americans, as we see, especially Trump and his administration, are somehow very involved. Now, we have been very worried about how much Trump has focus and attention span on every single deal he makes or everything. Now we feel that he is very much focused on this, and somehow destiny made that he is the American president of the Gaza issue. He never expected this. Gaza never expected this, but this is how it is. And apparently it's dear to his heart, to Trump, to make it work. This is why we heard him many times saying that it's gonna be strong, that it's not under jeopardy.
And Sara, it's really interesting because Wissam is saying there that he thinks the ceasefire will hold. Other people have said the framework does have lots of questions when it comes to these 20 points that still haven't been outlined, and there's a lot to be discussed. Do you think Donald Trump is still keeping the right amount of pressure on Israel to carry through to the second phase of the ceasefire deal? Is enough actually being done?
Well, it was a very robust response from President Trump to the news that Israel had resumed those strikes yesterday. It's worth pointing out that Israel has now said it's resuming the truce, but President Trump essentially saying, look, there was a violation that Israel saw. They were right to respond how they did, warning Hamas that if it didn't play by the terms of that ceasefire agreement, that they would, he said, be terminated, that they're a small part of the Middle East peace process. So the warning there to Hamas was very, very clear. That pressure that the United States has put on Israel, and President Trump himself, of course, spearheading that, has been absolutely critical, not just to getting the ceasefire, but now to sustaining it. And he has made it absolutely clear in his response that it is not to be jeopardized. And I think we have, to a large degree, seen Israel, despite what is a clear violation of the truce from their side too, resuming that with their allegations of Hamas breaking the ceasefire, resuming those strikes. They haven't used all the cards that they have, so it was a limited strike. But I think there are some big questions for the Trump administration here around the ceasefire deal, given what has just happened, because we've learned a little bit more about what played out on the ground. Israel is saying that they've not only accused Hamas of dragging their feet when it comes to returning the bodies of the dead hostages, but also accusing Hamas of killing an Israeli soldier in Rafah. Now, Hamas have denied that. There are question marks over who is it who's actually monitoring the ceasefire, potential violations of the ceasefire, and decisions around whether one side or the other chooses to respond to what they allege are violations. And that remains extremely unclear, although clearly in the background you do have the US applying that pressure to ensure that Israel carried out those limited strikes. But in those strikes itself, Israel said they were targeting military commanders. We know from reports on the ground from aid agencies that women and children were among those that have been killed. So the fragility of the ceasefire and the lack of clarity around who's actually monitoring violations, responses to violations potentially moving forward, who oversees that, and what the process is for deciding that, means that the Palestinian civilians on the ground in Gaza are essentially living day to day now with this threat of the resumption of strikes from Israel over their heads every day. Now, we knew it was probably going to be like that given the shaky nature of all of this. That pressure moving forward, it is going to remain absolutely critical. And for now, look, President Trump clearly remains very, very engaged. This is absolutely one of the main achievement of his administration by a long mile. So it's something that the administration want to preserve. President Trump himself is clearly making sure that that pressure remains on Israel so that even when we see this kind of response from them, it's limited for the time being.
I wanted to add something to what Sara said. I agree with her absolutely. And let's look at the Gaza agreement as a vehicle for what's coming next. So for the Americans, and for the first time actually, we heard Trump in his interview with the Time magazine, we saw some kind of round, comprehensive political view and policy on the Middle East. This is something that was a bit surprising for me. He has an idea about where things are going. And this Gaza thing, although it's only about Gaza, and it's very difficult, and we are still in the beginning, and Israel has every capacity to jeopardize and to sabotage this. And let's not forget that every stone that will enter Gaza will have to pass through the borders and will have to be allowed by Israel. But having said this, for the Americans, this deal is the vehicle of what's coming next, of a broader peace. If the Americans are somehow able to make this work with a great deal of focus, with a great deal of engagement from Trump himself, and with a great deal of friendly pressure from all the powers that are now important for Trump in the region. Now they think they can take the region further. Somehow Trump believes that he is the president that can finally bring peace. Okay, this is cheesy a bit, but in his mind it's very interesting, bringing peace to this region. If he can claim this eventually at the end of his mandate, it's going to be big. And no one in Israel can say he is not, pro-Israel enough. And now no one in the Arab world also can say that he is completely against Israel because he has been tough with the Israelis. So Gaza is very important. It's more than Gaza. Gaza is more than Gaza. This is what I want to say. And the Americans understand this, and many others in the regions. Maybe the Syrians. What's coming next with the Syrians is very interesting. And maybe after the Syrians, other great powers in the region, maybe also Lebanon. So let's see, a lot is unfolding. Gaza is just a title, but what's coming next is much wider, much more comprehensive.
Wissam and Sara, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Stay right there as we move on to another story now. And a migrant sex offender, Mr. Kenley, released from an Essex prison, has been deported with no right to return to the UK. Hadush Kabatu was jailed in September after sexually assaulting a woman and a 14-year-old girl, but was mistakenly set free by prison staff on Friday. A two-day manhunt followed as Kabatu has now been put on a flight back to Ethiopia. Sara, this has been a story that has kind of shocked the UK. It's easy to say that. And I mean, gosh, major questions for the Labour government to answer here.
Yes, just a huge embarrassment for the Labour government, Leigh-Ann. They've come out now with the news today that they have deported him back to Ethiopia, although there are reports now emerging that he had to be paid after threatening to claim asylum. Again, so questions upon questions over this incident that the government have put down to human error. But critics are saying that simply isn't good enough. There are questions over how exactly this was able to happen. Is this due to staffing issues in training and ability to manage these situations? Is it staffing shortages? The government have come out and said, look, we are launching an independent inquiry. They always say that. That obviously kicks the can down the road. And people are wanting questions now about how this offender who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl was able to slip through the net and go free in this manner, sparking this very, very embarrassing manhunt that it resulted ultimately, thankfully, in his detention and now the reports of his deportation. But a lot of anger in the UK over this incident and highlighting, I think, weaknesses within the system. And of course, coming on the back, actually, of, a bruising couple of months for the Labour government when it comes to issues of immigration. They have their one in, one out policy that very embarrassingly a few weeks ago saw someone deported and then come back in to the country. So there are just major questions over this very serious incident that has really shocked, as you said, Leigh-Ann, shocked the United Kingdom.
And Wissam, we saw a few months ago there were big protests outside the migrant hotels in the UK, the hotels that they're using to house asylum seekers. And a lot of that was down to the gentleman we saw falsely released from prison. But England seemed to have kept a sort of control of that happening once again. But human error, for the Home Secretary, David Lammy, to say it was human error is extremely concerning because, people's children are at risk.
And indeed, this story has been resonating a lot, not only in the UK, but in the world, because of the whole things that come with it. First, you have a human error that shouldn't have occurred. So what is this human error? How is that even possible? Even the man himself was confused and didn't know what he do. He stayed in London and eventually he was convinced to leave. It was embarrassing and amicable. Now, having said this, for the psychology of the nation, it has been not too long when we saw people protesting and, so it brings the question of immigration, the failures of the Labour government, the idea of one in, one out, the Africa thing, the Rwanda scheme. It is one big story that is not making a lot of sense. And now you have this, it's too much.
Sorry, I wanted to say David Lammy is now the Justice Secretary.
Yeah.
He has changed position, which has not been something that the Labour Party have shied away from because obviously it's been not in the best way when it comes to MPs. But what I also find really interesting when we do have a look at the story, and Sara, right now in the UK, in the polls, the Reform Party, the right wing of the UK parties are now leading the charge and are now on top in the polls. And that's something the UK hasn't seen for a long time, Sara. And a lot of this comes down to failures like this in the Labour government.
Absolutely. And this is central to the Reform Party's platform that they're running on, that they will be the ones to, they say, tackle the immigration problem. And it's just been in many ways seen as Labour consistently handing Nigel Farage, the Reform Party, easy wins here with their handling of the immigration issue in the United Kingdom. I thought it was interesting that the Home Office Minister said that, we accept it was a blunder. We're really angry about it, as we know the public are. I think the difficulty with those sort of statements is it doesn't really give much clarity over, again, what exactly went wrong and how this was able to happen. Now, the Labour government have come out and said, look, we put immediate controls in various prisons to try and ensure that this doesn't happen again. But as we said, this isn't an isolated incident. It's an incident coming on the back of a series of measures taken by Labour that appear not to be working when it comes to immigration. And Leigh-Ann, you're absolutely right. The Reform Party in the UK are absolutely capitalising on what they see as Labour's failings in this area. And it was interesting, Wissam pointing out, it's true here in America as well. These sorts of stories in the UK and the way that the UK is dealing with immigration does catch the attention of the public here. You know, remember President Trump, when he visited the United Kingdom for his state visit, he said pretty plainly, with Keir Starmer standing next to him, look, you need to send in the military, send them, you know, we've dealt with our borders, you can do it too, but you just need strong measures. Perhaps not a message that the UK Prime Minister has taken on board, but certainly one perhaps that will be resonating with him right now as he deals with the fallout of this latest very embarrassing incident when it comes to immigration and the handling of it by his government.
And we can't forget that Nigel Farage, the leader of the Reform Party, is very good friends with Donald Trump, actually went over and helped him in his campaign to win the second presidency.
And a lot of his friends are bracing for, winning also in Europe. A lot of taboos, I think, will fall because the failure of the Labour also came after the failure of, the Tories also. Because
yes, of course. Yes.
It's failure, all around. And sometime, not only in the UK, but also in France, probably in Germany, we will see that the far right will eventually be in the seat and probably they will fail again. So we will see about that.
Well, as we do know, there's an election happening in the Netherlands currently, and all the polls pointed to the far-right party winning that. However, on the day of the election, we have seen a shift to the sort of centre-left, the progressives.
It's classic. At the last days, you see people, getting scared. But, to end on this, the right or far-right, although it is a very disputed term, they claim that the Italian model with Giorgia Meloni is a success story. And what the message they are trying to convey now, that the Meloni success story, politically, on the immigration, economically, can be replicated everywhere. And they can claim that maybe this is the way forward. And of course, you have Trump also, who is also claiming to be making every gain possible on all the fronts.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And let's watch out for that election in the Netherlands tomorrow. Thank you so much, Sara and Wissam. Now, it's that time of the show where Wissam and Sara have chosen two of the quirkiest stories of the day. And yours is really interesting because it's a list of the world's safest countries. They've been revealed, and who's coming out on top?
Well, it's a list of the safest destinations and countries, of course. And on top, we have the country that you have just been mentioning. It's the Netherlands. It is the safest country to visit. I'll be visiting the country very soon with my family for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
It's a pure coincidence, by the way. But in the same time, we can see that other places that unfortunately has been stained with a lot of negative stories. We have France in the 13th place, and we have the United Kingdom in the 14th place. We have an Arab country in the 7th place, which is the United Arab Emirates, although we have other rankings that has been consistently putting Abu Dhabi and other UAE cities on the very top of safest cities in the world. But a question mark, big question mark, Denmark, which is the happiest country in the world, number 15, not very convincing, but it's okay. Now, having reviewed this list together, we have to admit one thing. Having these lists like these will be affecting us a lot in the future for taking decision where to go next. Safe destination is a label that will be needed by all those trying to lure tourists from around the world. And
it's so interesting because we do have a look at this list, and I've noticed something, that France is 13th, which UK's 14th. Not many European countries are actually in the top 5, and also think Spain's not on there, and Spain is such a popular destination. I can't believe Ibiza's not number 1, Sara.
And Italy is not on the list as well.
Oh yes, Italy's not on the list either.
Austria is number 3, which is very beautiful and very, very safe as well. Canada, number 5. New Zealand, very far, so number 6. United Arab Emirates, number 7. Switzerland, beautiful Switzerland, number 8. 9 is Japan. 10 is Ireland. 11, Belgium. 12, Portugal. 13, France. United Kingdom 14, Denmark 15. I think we only forgot number 2, which is Australia.
Australia, forgotten. But now we're going to move on to a country, the US, and Sarah's going to tell us all about a New York mom who's terrifying her neighborhood for Halloween.
Yes, guys, well, I was going to say the US is one of those countries that I think that's not a list, safest destinations, that President Trump is going to be able to top anytime soon. But Halloween, yes, here in America, it is huge. It's not a thing really in Britain to the same extent. Some people do it, some people don't. But this is a New York homeowner who celebrates every single year by putting animatronics up in her garden. And guys, you have to take a look at the reaction of the local school bus as it goes past. Take a listen. If you spook easily, but for me personally, I do. I find it very bizarre even walking around my local neighborhood, just how much effort people put into getting a scare out of passers-by. They really do not hold back, and the school kids, they're very appreciative, obviously, of that.
I just noticed that those weren't real humans on the grass.
No, no, no.
That's really creepy.
I just had a walk with my daughters here in Dubai, and a lot of people in our neighborhood are preparing for Halloween. It's graves everywhere. It is, skeletons everywhere. So it is getting a lot of, spooky is very fun for kids, but also not only for kids, also grown-ups like to be spooky.
I would like to go around and trick-or-treat, but just be given loads of money, not sweets. Earn myself.
What would you guys dress up as? What are your Halloween costumes going to be?
Well, my daughters have prepared something for me.
What?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you are very classic, like old school like me, you would, you'd be a captain, you'd be something not very spooky. But now that my kids don't believe in this, they want me to be spooky, so I'll have, I'll be a black angel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think a vampire. Back in,
Something.
yeah, what would I be if I was...
You cannot be spooky. You are too...
Oh, I don't, maybe. I was thinking about Harley Quinn. Do you remember from that film? Was it, what was the name of that film? I forgot it. But that would be one that I'd probably be. But I must tell you something, I'm so boring, I've never dressed up.
You have to try it.
I have to
It's
try.
a liberating exercise.
I'll come to your house for Halloween, Wissam. Sarah, what are you dressing up as?
Do you know, I was going to say I'd like to be Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, but I don't know if that's diplomatically correct. So maybe I'll have to have a little rethink on my costume.
That's a good one, sir.
That is a really good one.
I've got a little blonde son. He could be Trump.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And I can be Pam Bondi. But everyone, thank you so much. There we are. We have a full White House for Halloween. Thanks to today's guest, Wissam Keyrouz, editor at Al Arabiya, who was, of course, in the studio with me, and correspondent Sara Firth, who was all the way over in Washington. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on X. G&T is coming up next. Thank you and goodbye.